And the first order of business, thank you so much. You totally messed me up. Is a roll call to establish our quorum.
Yeah.
Woodson,
Here.
Chair Amadeo,
Here.
Commissioner St. John,
Here.
Commissioner Herr, Commissioner Jacobson.
Here.
You have quorum, Madam Chair.
Thank you. So now if you will rise for a moment of silence, would someone like to lead us in the pledge? Okay. Pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thank you, Commissioner Hurd. Okay, so now we will move on to special announcements and communications from the floor. And if there's anyone who wishes to speak, I'm not sure who Fred Smith is.
Oh, he's the amp guy.
Oh, okay, the behind the curtain.
Yep.
Okay, so seeing that there's no one in the audience and no one except behind the curtain, we will move on to ex parte communications for quasi judicial matters. And I don't believe we have any quasi judicial matters before us tonight.
No.
So there shouldn't be anything there. And we'll move on to the consent agenda, which is the Planning Commission draft action minutes from December 14th. Does anyone have any questions or comments regarding the draft minutes? No lights, seeing none. Then I would entertain a motion to approve. We have a motion by
Commissioner Jacobson.
I'm sorry. Commissioner Jacobson, I apologize again. I don't know what it is.
I'll second.
And
To move along, I'll
Yes.
second it.
we have a second by Commissioner St. John. All those in favor? Oh, wait a minute. We have
Yeah.
roll.
Commissioner Rana, Commissioner Woodson,
Yes.
Chair Amadeo,
Yes.
Commissioner St. John,
Yes.
Commissioner Herr, Commissioner Jacobson.
Yes.
Motion passes.
Thank you so much. And I apologize to Commissioner Jacobson. You know,
I'm just a pretend you would make you Saint Jacobson.
and then I'd remember. Yeah, there you go. And I'd forget you. So. Okay, so we're going to move on to the to the informational items. We're looking at informational updates and training. So I'm going to turn this over to staff at this point.
Yeah, so good evening, Commission. Going to try to make it an annual tradition, the first couple of meetings of January to be a training session to go over legislation that got adopted. Kind of there's that term to continually sharpen your saw as a professional. This is part of that endeavor to encourage me and the staff to keep up on the different bills that we have to implement and then to inform the commission of that. So this is one of my initiatives that we'll be starting. I think I actually did this a little bit last year. So we're going to go over a legislative update. We're going to do some CEQA training, making motions. We've already talked quite a bit about ex parte communication. I'm going to preview some of the housing element action items that the commission will have to undertake. And then I'll be hitting up kind of the bigger ticket items that the commission will be reviewing. So just kind of give you a preview. So I have this all in the PowerPoint, which I will share. And so hopefully you guys can see that. Let me do it from, and this is an interactive. If you want to stop me We don't have that many slides, so if you have questions, just, go ahead. So as I said, at this point, I've lost track of the number of bills housing related. I was quoted a couple of years ago, oh, there have been about 31 bills adopted in a 3 or 4 year period. I mean, I think at this point, it's probably about 50 or 60 different bills. It's basically full-time employment for attorneys at this point. It's really hard to keep track. So I'm trying as a staff, we're working as a staff to try as best we can to keep track. I mean, the general theme of a lot of these bills is, hey, city of Marina and every other city, streamline development, don't put up roadblocks to building housing, and the limited land we have in California, use it to the best feasible. That's basically the tone of a lot of these, but we'll go over them in detail. And so we broke this up as staff. Allison was going to work on some. Nick and I had Allison go home today because she's been working crazy hours. So we'll hit up all the bills today. So the first one, AB 1490, this would make the adaptive reuse of existing buildings to 100% affordable projects and allowed use, even if it conflicts with your local zoning or regulations. There has to be a certain percentage for low and very low. It has to be on an infill site, which is basically within a city. They don't want you to convert industrial sites. And the existing building would need to include residential units or have commercial uses that allow them on a temporary occupancy basis. So the genesis of this is kind of continuing the project room key and home key. Hey, city of LA or whatever, we noticed that hotel is kind of run down and maybe it's lived past its life. Well, let's convert that hotel motel to a residential use as long as 100% it's a 100% affordable project. So that's AB 1490.
So can I ask a
Yeah,
brief question?
yeah, this is an interactive.
Right. I know that we have had motels here in Marina that were used to house during COVID. And but they were still available for renting to the occasional traveler. So with this, do they have to go fully to affordable or can be mixed like it was during COVID?
The way I'm reading it, it looks like it's 100% affordable project. That's my understanding.
Okay.
So
But it also takes in any office buildings or.
I believe so. Office. Yeah, a lot of San Francisco office districts were kind of dying out because people are working at home, and this was kind of also the genesis of that as well.
And I think even before COVID, lots of cities in the Bay Area were facing that. San Jose had a lot of empty
Yeah,
multi-story buildings, office buildings, so,
yeah,
and malls, yes.
yeah. And by the way, for the benefit of the commission, we're only highlighting 8 or 10. You have the full American Planning Association packet we gave the commission. If there's another bill you guys are interested in, we're happy to research it and we can put it on the agenda. These are just the ones I thought were most relevant for the commission and the city. AB 821, this is actually directly relevant to the general plan. So if a city or county amends the general plan in a manner that makes it inconsistent with the zoning code, now people have standing in court to sue the city to say, hey, you need to update your zoning code and make it consistent. AB 821 also allows a development project to move forward in a timely manner when the project complies with the general plan, but there's inconsistencies in the zoning code. The bill would provide that upon written notice, a government agency would have to amend its zoning code within 90 days to be consistent with the general plan. So this actually is kind of a big deal in the planning world because every city I've worked for, the zoning codes are just always lacking in terms of general plans. So I've already tasked Allison with this. As soon as we're getting close to getting the general plan done, we need to be mindful of this legislation. So you'll probably see us probably about a year from now tackle this a little bit more and looking at the zoning code and, hey, where are those inconsistencies? And we need to make it consistent. So Allison was gonna do this one. So SB 35 was adopted in 2017. It created a streamlined approval process for qualified multifamily and mixed-use affordable housing projects. This now has been extended to the coastal zone. It also extends the life of SB 35 to 2036. And it prohibits local agencies from requiring special studies, tests, reports, or other material that are not necessary or don't help meet the objective standards adopted by the agency. So basically, SB 35 is now applicable to coastal areas. So pass it out to Nick now.
Did we skip?
We skipped one, yeah.
423. Do you want me to do this one? Okay, no worries. This is, well, it's 423 continued, I think. This second page, this is just going in and just mentioning that Marina's new objective design standards will be adopted into the comprehensive LCP update. So we will be consistent with SB 423 for our city once we update our local coastal program more comprehensively. And there's an interesting note, Supreme control of the coastal zone by the California Coastal Commission is challenged by this statute and the need for housing in California. So you're seeing this tension between the legislature and the Coastal Commission. What does this mean for Marina? Marina has a very constrained coastline with limited development potential. And so you're not going to see a huge amount of SB 35 projects in the coastal zone because it's a very limited amount of properties that this would impact. Most notably, the Walmart site at 150 Beach would be the most likely for us to see an SB 35 project. Sure. Mhm.
SB 35 is the more popular bill. So, yeah. Yes, integrated into the coastal area. Yeah, SB 35. That's the more popular, famous bill. Yeah. Yes. Yes, yes, yes.
Okay, moving on. So next we have SB 684. This is for small lot subdivisions. So this is a mandatory bill for all cities and counties and agencies. It creates two ministerial processes, meaning that there's no discretionary review. This would mean that they wouldn't come before you for the entitlement, as well as the ability to get building permits for small lot residential subdivisions and multifamily zones before the final maps are recorded. So what this is doing is it's really aimed at giving developers the ability to make smaller developments to help out with the missing middle. So the two ministerial processes that it creates is first the ability to subdivide 10 units or fewer, and then also to for projects that are 10 units or fewer are now ministerial review in multifamily zone. And it has to be in an urban area and it has to be units or parcels that are 5 acres or less. And then of course it has all the same classic caveats of not environmentally sensitive area. It's typical for bills like this to go through that to make sure it's ministerial unless there's some issue there that has to be mitigated or addressed. And it can't physically preclude projects meeting the Mullen density or default densities. So even if your zoning is lesser than the Mullen density, which is a standard set for jurisdictions, they would still be able to meet that density of the Mullen density. And for our city, we're suburban city, so it'd be 20 units per acre. And then they restrict our ability to set development standards to make sure that this is consistent. They limit setbacks, parking, floor area ratio, things of that nature. the subdivision lots, the lot size, it can be as small, just wanted to point this out, it can be as small as 600 square feet, which is very, very small. I played around with it a little bit, and you could do about a 400 square foot house on a 600 square foot lot, 2 stories, so it'd be 800 square feet. That's kind of becoming the norm, is that's sort of the standard. I mean, you saw that with SB9, so you're seeing that again. This is even tinier, but they're really pushing for that really small micro units. And this is gonna help with, they think it's gonna help with like first time home buyers and stuff like that, so.
Can I-
Go ahead, questions?
Yeah, you've got 2 questions.
Good.
I'm thinking about Cypress Knolls, which is 1 lot, 1 developer. But I know the council wanted to see that be used to develop housing for that missing middle. Can that property be subdivided between multiple developers in order to meet the criteria of small lots?
So, yeah, so currently it's bigger than the maximum size under this bill.
Right,
So this
that's what
bill
I
is 5 acres, so it wouldn't apply to Cypress Knolls this time. If somebody, and the city has control over that site, so it's a unique site. If, 10 years or 15 years down the line, if there were sites that were, 10,000 square feet or 20,000 square feet and it had the potential for this, someone could come in and
So
use
down the
this.
road,
Yeah,
could work
if it
with
was
them, it'll
zoned-
be done in
right,
advance.
right.
It could be
So
subdivided in.
anyone that wants, like, let's say we gave this over to a developer, they would have to go through our subdivision ordinance and go through all the normal typical stuff that you would see where it'd go before everybody. So this wouldn't apply to a larger project. Really, it's meant for smaller projects. You're seeing a big push for the sort of small cottage development coming back to cities and states, and it's across the nation. It's becoming more and more common. So.
And then the other question that I had is when you're talking about small lots, 600 square feet, I can't even imagine that.
Yeah.
And then you said, so, you could do an 800 square foot.
2-story.
Two-story.
Yeah.
I have noticed that we're seeing some 3 stories.
Mhm.
So could that be done under these conditions where you could do either, say townhomes, each one being their own lot, but they are still connected and do 3 stories that
Ye-
way on a small lot? And would it qualify under this?
Yeah, I think you could, the intention is to sell these lots off individually, is behind this bill. So you can do them with like a 0 lot line, like maybe with the way you see in the dunes, like the duet model.
Right.
Where they have 2 units connected, but
But it's,
it really is looking at single family homes that are very small. They're not looking for big single family homes in this bill. It's not meant to be a big, expensive, it's meant to be small, cheaper, starter home type thing, was really the intent behind
I'm thinking the garage on the ground floor and then
yeah,
2 floors above that. So
Yeah.
it would still 400 square feet would work for a garage.
right,
And then doing,
right. Yeah,
so.
and then
okay.
you could do a 3-story and yeah, exactly. Mhm.
I'm just trying to figure out how to maximize.
Yeah, and just to clarify, what the bill says is, and Nick points it out, limits setback parking and FAR. You can't limit it to the extent that you prohibit getting the 10 units. So if you have a super tiny lot and you can get the 10 units and you're within the height and the parking and the setbacks, great. If you can't by the development standards for the city, then you have to give some waivers and exceptions. So that's generally how, and as Nick was saying, this is kind of starter home.
Right.
Let's use the limited land that we have in California to get more housing built. That's
Right.
the intent. So,
Okay, Commissioner Woodson had a question for you.
and that also that this would not go in front of the commission, that they're
Right.
making this a ministerial staff level approval. So.
I'm
Okay.
moving right past starter homes to modulars. And the example that I'm coming up with is actually where I literally live in South Lake Tahoe right now for the winter in the place we have there. This is and this is within the TARPA area, so Tahoe Regional Planning Association, the TARPA boundary lines. And what developers have found up there is they're taking these small, what in the 50s and 60s were mobile home parks that were created that are zoned multifamily. And literally the owner of this one, it's 12 units. It absolutely meets I mean, less than an acre, there's 12, I mean, I totally get where it's coming from. And what's happened is they were, let's see, 1, 2, 3, 4, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, plus the main residential villa. So there are 12 units. There were 12 lots in this. All had single wides that are 10 feet by 36 feet, because that's typically what was standard in the mid 60s. And what the developer is doing in the spring is he is ripping them all out and replacing with new modulars.
Mhm.
So looking at the minimum lot size of 600 totally fits, because he's going to put a modular in. It's basically going to be a 1-bedroom with a living room and a small kind of kitchen area. And there'll be a spot for a car.
Mhm.
And it absolutely fits within 600 square feet. He's going to be able to put, I think his goal, I think, is to put 15 in total when he's said and done within that area. So that's kind of my background to my question is that seems like it would transition down to here in a very similar fashion. That if there was a place, an infill lot that we had that was 30,000 square feet or so, 40,000 square feet, and we have a bunch of those across the city, that would be an ideal space for something like this.
Mhm.
And that would be done ministerially.
And at that point, this now moves. So now what we've ended up with is now we've got a multi-building development
Mhm.
with individual modulars
Mhm.
that is now ministerially approved.
Correct. Yeah. Yeah. So typically the way it works now, the way the law is now with like the subdivision map act and stuff is if you want to do a subdivision of more than 4, parcels, then you have to go through a parcel map and a tentative map and a final map. So it's planning commission and city council twice, and it's city council twice and planning commission once, but it's a long process and it's very involved. And so that tax on time and cost, and so that they're cutting through all that with this.
So the kind of follow-up to that then is, if I'm going to turn around and I have this 30,000 square foot lot, then I'm going to turn around and put 6 to 10 units onto, because I can do that. And I'm sitting in my neighborhood, and now my neighbors get wind of this, because now this is ministerial. There's nothing public. There's no coming before the planning commission. There's literally, they come to you. They submit, hey, this is what we're going to do.
Mhm.
Nobody knows except the developer and you.
Mhm.
And then all of a sudden they start building.
Yeah.
And
So
then
it is only
all of a
multi,
sudden we have this kind
Yeah.
of tension that
Yeah.
exists within our community.
it's only multifamily zone, just so we're on the same page. So it can only be so you couldn't do it in a single family zone. So just multifamily. So it wouldn't have as big of impact on the single family zones where, higher density might impact them. So if your lot, I think your lot is an R1, so that might not apply, but if you had a lot in downtown Marina, for instance, or in any multifamily zone, yeah, you could come in and do this. Yeah. And yeah. Question?
Commissioner Herhouse.
Oh,
Yeah.
I was curious, is the term housekeeping zone, does it refer to particular area?
Say that again? Yeah, so if you have a zone in your city that's zoned for equine, so for horses,
We do.
then this does not apply. They've started doing this this last year. Equestrians, yeah, so I just added it in there as informational. I don't believe we have a horse keeping zone in our city. We don't have that zoning, like a zoning district for that. I think there are some cities and I think that maybe the horse lobbyists are very strong or something, so they're adding that into bills.
So it's literally housekeeping zone then, not even metaphor.
Yeah. Yeah.
And I think it's also that they're trying to do this more in like urban infill. They don't want this to become a mechanism for sprawl in rural areas. They're trying to keep this more to the cities, so, yeah.
Yeah, that's a
Do,
good way of putting
do these units have to be for sale or can they be rental units? Because somebody said something about it's good for first time homeowners, but
I think the intent is for sale. I don't know if they have any explicit provisions. I don't think they can restrict, they can't restrict whether they rent them or not, so. I don't, I didn't read anything about whether there's any provision about that, but the intent behind subdivision is to sell, usually to sell, so that's the idea is that you subdivide and then they need be individual lots and you'd sell them off. You know, and if you're already in a multifamily zone, if you want to do rentals, it's more likely that it'll just do a traditional multifamily construction. So, Yeah.
I do think his question is important though, because we've had a couple of developments in here of single family homes where when they went through the approval process, the plan was to sell, but markets change.
Mhm.
And so they end up renting those homes. That's not prohibited through this. It's anticipated that homes will be sold, correct?
that's correct.
Okay.
Okay, moving on to the next one. This is AB 1033. This is a ADU bill. So there, currently when you build an ADU with the current law, you can't sell them individually from from the main house. And so what this bill does is it makes it's optional, so it's non-compulsory. So cities can adopt this ordinance if they want to. But it would allow them to be, for a property owner to create a condominium with their main house, the ADU and the JADU or whatever they have on their site. So it basically gives cities the ability to adopt an ordinance of this kind. At this time, there's no direction for us to adopt this. We haven't heard no one in the public is asking for this. This is just informational that if we wanted so chose, we could adopt this. We wouldn't have, I believe adopting this type of ordinance would be exempt from CEQA through this bill. And it streamlines our ability to adopt it, but it's not a requirement. So this is just an FYI.
Okay, so FYI, they wouldn't be required to subdivide. It would be,
It would be,
the lot
Con-
would be owned by,
so yeah,
the
so,
original lot would be owned by the person who developed the ADU in the first place.
right,
But it
so,
would
yeah,
operate as a condominium. Right,
right,
right.
right,
Okay,
yeah,
just wanted to make sure I understood it.
yeah.
Yes,
Yeah.
this is the second time this bill went through. It kind of was actually the third year. And there's still a whole bunch of question and we haven't done a deep dive. We're just giving summaries of some of these bills, but you're bringing up a good point. You have to form an HOA here for 3 people or how does that work out? Shared utilities and, let's say the original owner dies, but somebody's in the condo and the ADU. I mean, there's a whole host of issues that are
Right.
gonna come out of this stuff. So you're asking a really good question
It
and
might be better
Yeah.
if they subdivided their property.
right. It's
Yeah.
Sounds like
so-
you, as a property owner, I would be giving up a lot of control over a small piece of my land
Yeah,
to somebody
Mhm.
else legally that would create challenges.
yeah. So,
Yeah, it's an interesting one.
Yeah.
Previously, the law was only allowed it if you're a nonprofit under certain very limited circumstances, and so this is. I think the original intent was to make it mandatory, but then they couldn't get it through that way, and so they made it optional. So we'll see how it shifts over time, and these types of bills are good to be aware of now, so you know what might change in the future. So for now, it's only applies if you want to adopt it. So at this time, we're not.
So that could be, in that case, it'd be like, say, a nonprofit exists and they're doing building development to help people get on their feet.
Like,
And they
yeah.
create, they build 6 or 10 units. And then eventually their intention is that they back out of the responsibility and they slowly turn over the property to those tenants. Each one is able to buy it when they can afford it. And then eventually they've kind of created a small neighborhood.
Yeah,
That could
seems
be a
like,
way it could be
yeah,
used.
that seems like a fair,
Yeah, the example is Habitat for Humanity that I like to use. So
Okay.
they'll come into our community, they'll help people build them, and then they might, yeah, so exactly how you described it. So. So the last bill is AB 1308. This one is interesting in that I don't believe it's going to really impact the city of Marina either. It prohibits parking requirements for single family remodels, renovations, or additions. So in some cities, if you add on to your home X 100 square feet, so let's say 600 square feet or 1,000 square feet, you would have to also increase your parking. And what this does is it restricts density over time, so you can't increase the density too much of single family homes with stringent parking requirements. In the city of Marina, though, we have our 2 garage units per home. And whenever someone builds an ADU, we wouldn't restrict them from increasing their home just because they build a JADU in their garage and replace the garage. So we're already consistent and compliant with this rule with our interpretation of the ADU law. So it's not going to have a huge impact on the city, but it is interesting to see that they're really focused. The legislature is very focused on allowing people to increase their homes and not having to increase the parking. So definitely interesting. It does, all these bills speak to the same climate that we're in right now, with housing being the primary focus still. So
Well, I was Googling SB9 because, in the previous
Right.
slide, and Google was, helping me differentiate ADU versus SB9.
Yeah.
ADU is allowed in historic district, whereas SB9 is not. Then for us, like the city of Marina, when we have to do this, this small lot development.
Mhm.
I mean, is there a particular area in Marina that we could call district, which I kind of doubt, even though we have.
No, we don't really have a strong historic preservation ordinance. So, yeah,
So
we
it's
don't.
maybe, SB9.
Yeah, so SB not, so SB, so there's, just for the benefit of the whole commission, there's SB 9 and there's SB 330 and then there's SB 35. So SB 9 was the one that got adopted 2 years ago that said, hey, property owner, you can split your lot and you can get 2 units on one lot and 2 units on the other. Or you can have a house, a JADU, an ADU in the back, and another whole separate house. So that's SB 9. SB 35 is just a very streamlined provision that said, I want to build multifamily. I'm going to file my permit. All the rules in place the day I filed my permit are locked in, and you have to approve my project in, I forgot the number, 180 days. If I agree to do a certain percentage of the jobs to be for the trades, the unions, and the union type jobs. So that's SB 35. So just to clarify.
I have a question. We have a lot of odd lots. They have very narrow, like single wide to get into the lot. I like a handle on a pot. You have a big area, but getting into it is a very restricted. Would those lots, because I think they're all in R1 zoning.
Right.
Could someone come in and change the zoning to R4 or R3 or R2 or could they change the zoning? Excuse me, if they were listed as R4, could they change the zoning to R1 in order to take advantage of this?
I mean, we'd have to look at the general plan consistency, and generally you try not to go down in zoning, you try to go up
Yeah.
for more density. So, but to your original question, a lot of these bills, even the one, I'm sorry, where was it? Oh, the SB 684, you're really hitting the nail on the head. Like, hey, we have all these little shotgun lots. Well, the state is basically saying, hey, city, don't, we want these lots to be developed. So, I mean, there's language in here that says if you have zoning standards that don't allow you to get to these 10 units, well, then guess what, city? You need to change that, or you need to allow it.
So in other
Right, and
words,
so it's.
we don't wait for a developer to change it. We change our zoning in order to accomplish.
Right, or the developer now has the right to say, hey, your square footage requirements are not allowing me to build the 10 units. You need to change that as part of this SB 684.
And then they don't
Because
have
of
to
all
wait
of-
for that change because SB 684
Right,
allows it to happen. Okay,
right.
yes.
So that's kind of the genesis of, hey, we have all these little weird parcels up and down the state of California. the legislature is seeing we need more housing. Okay, cities, let people get all these different ways to get more housing. So,
So we are becoming more developer friendly.
yeah.
Exactly.
And less public hearings, less input from the public. So we're not passing judgment. That's just the fact of that's what the tone of these bills are. I could do this one or?
Yeah.
Yeah, and then continuing on our theme for housing, so Alec and Allison have gotten, we do have the pre-approved plans, we got the contract signed. So we will hopefully be getting those pre-approved ADU plans ready to rock and roll by March or April. So continuing on the theme of allowing to build more different types of housing in the city.
Do we appear to have a lot of interest in ADUs?
Well, Nick covers the counter all day, every day, so you can speak to that.
Yeah, we talk to people multiple times a week about ADUs. Oh, yeah. And anyone that buys a parcel in Marina now, they almost always ask, can you build an ADU on this parcel? And yeah, it comes up constantly. And there's a lot of very excited interest in the pre-approved plans. I'd say people are waiting to see when they get released by the architects so they can come in. And so we should have a flurry of applications in March or April, whenever those are done. So.
Yeah, there's a property on, California and Carmel, maybe 2 houses in. And I watched that transform over a period of probably just 90 days. But now it looks like it's an ADU and maybe 2 other rental
Yeah.
properties in it. It's kind of it's completely changed.
Yep.
Are you talking the one that they boxed in their driveway?
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah, they didn't make their own.
I'm sorry. I'm sorry.
No, they're really nice people who were.
All right, moving on. So yeah, so that's the theme of the bills, build more housing, cities, don't put as many roadblocks up, not as many public hearings, go, go, go for the housing. And so that's basically, like I said, if there's other bills that you guys think of or hear about, happy to research it and bring it back as a short little informational item to the commission. So moving on to CEQA training. So I started my career in CEQA and it's kind of a convoluted law, so I thought it'd be good to give the commission some training. So what is CEQA? CEQA is the California Environmental Quality Act. It is the environmental law that all city planners in the state of California have to, be mindful of. So there's 3 kind of levels to CEQA. Is this a project? Yes. If it's a project under CEQA, meaning it might have an environmental impact, is it exempt from further review? So there's 2 categories of exemptions. Statutory exemptions are specifically excluded by the state legislature, and those are called out in the Public Resources Code. And then there's categorical exemptions, which are classes of projects that generally are considered not to have potential impacts on the environment. Statutory exemptions, one of the more famous ones is CEQA got adopted in the 1970s. In the 1984 Olympics, they said everything related to the 1984 Olympics is exempt from CEQA. They wrote that specifically into statute. And you can look further when they built SoFi Stadium in Carson for the Chargers and who was the Chargers? Who's else? The other team in LA?
Rams?
The Rams. That was given a statutory exemption, no CEQA. So anyways, that's statutory. We as planners and what you see on your staff reports is more the categorical exemptions. And these are just some of the list of ones that we usually bring to you guys. Is it a ministerial project? Is it an infill exemption? Is it covered by the general rule that if it doesn't have an impact on the environment, then it's exempt from CEQA? The one that you'll see a lot in your staff reports is CEQA exemption 15331. It's an infill exemption. It basically says, yes, it is a project under CEQA, but it is exempt because it's within Marina. It's consistent with the general plan. It's consistent with the zoning. and it's on a parcel that's less than 5 acres. So when you guys are making those findings, it's section 15331. You can actually Google that section. You know, go home or before we come to the meeting. These are things actually written into the California law. And so, and for more controversial projects, we will file the notice of exemption with the county clerk. So that there is a process by which to complete the CEQA process. So if it's a project under CEQA and it can't be exempt, the next level of CEQA is a mitigated negative declaration. So a mitigated negative declaration is basically, it's a project under CEQA. It will have some environmental impacts, but can there be mitigation measures that are adopted to reduce the environmental impacts? So you guys will see a mitigated neg deck at some point. We haven't done a lot since I've been here. And it will say, I'm just making this up. Yes, this project will add 20 trips to Del Monte, but we're gonna, as a mitigation measure to offset those trips, we're gonna make them install a new traffic light, put in a stop sign, add some roundabouts, and through those mitigation measures, we will reduce the environmental impact. So that's a mitigated neg deck. It's just basically the happy medium between a full-blown EIR, which takes 18 months to prepare, and an exemption, which is basically it's exempt.
So in our downtown
Yep, we're doing an EIR.
plan, right? So that, there was no exemption, no nothing. for that.
No, because it's a pretty significant impacts to the community.
Yeah.
And that brings us to our next one.
No, I have a question for you,
Yep.
Milan. So let's say we have a mitigated negative declaration that we make today, because our feeling is that this project doesn't have to meet the criteria or thresholds that we've set internally to the commission or the city and to requiring an EIR. But then 15 years from now, 20 years from now, we go to make a modification to a development that was built or a project that was done. And the community comes back and says, well, wait a minute, you did a mitigated neg deck back at the time, but you really shouldn't have done that. You should have known better and you should have done an EIR at the time. How do we, as a planning commission, how do we question or kind of ask the right questions during that initial process to ensure that we are setting our future commission and city council up to be covered?
Great question. And so on the slide here is the fair argument standards. If a fair argument can be made based on substantial evidence in the record that the project will have a significant adverse environmental impact, then an EIR is required. That is the legal threshold. So that to answer your question, well, should we have done a neg deck or an EIR? Well, was there substantial evidence entered into the record saying there would be a significant adverse impact? If the answer is no, maybe you can get away with a neg deck. So the next level of CEQA is an EIR. We are doing that for the downtown plan. We are doing that for the general plan. So the substantial evidence text, if there is substantial evidence of significant effects through the full analysis, an EIR is required. Substantial evidence is facts, reasonable assumptions predicated upon expert opinion supported by facts. It does not include argument, speculation, unsubstantiated opinions, or evidence which is clearly inaccurate or erroneous, or the evidence of social or economic impacts. Further, just because a project is controversial doesn't mean you have to do an EIR. Public controversy over the possible effects of a project is not sufficient reason to require an EIR. If there is no substantial evidence in light of the whole record, then the project may have a significant effect on the environment. So oftentimes as commissioners, less so here, but in other cities, you will get contacted at the grocery store or as a council member. hey, I'm really concerned about that McDonald's or what we name the project or whatnot. And, you know, a lot of my neighbors are really concerned and, well, we don't know if we're going to vote for you on the council if you support that project. And, right, that's the pressure that staff feels. And we have to say politely to policymakers, public controversy of a project doesn't warrant an EIR. Now, the reality is if we might be sued on a project, we probably will end up doing an EIR because that's the most robust analysis you can do. But, and it has to be a substantial evidence. It can't just be, well, I think traffic's gonna be bad. Therefore, hey, staff, you need to do an EIR, because an EIR takes 12 to 18 months to prepare. And it's a major undertaking for an applicant to do. So I can't go in good conscience to an applicant and say, oh, well, a couple of the neighbors really don't like your project. I'm gonna make you do an EIR. We need to have some evidence to support doing an EIR. So. This is the CEQA flow chart. We can blow this up for the commission at a later time. It just, like I said, breaks down the 3 levels of CEQA. You guys will mostly see the exemption categories, a mitigated neg deck, and then when I bring the downtown plan to the commission in June or July, it will have the EIR.
I understand these are the things that you normally see. I happen to have been on the planning commission when major projects on the former Fort Ord were coming forward. And yes, we did lots of CEQA documents. And in fact, one of my very first meetings was in regards to a major project, and I had this gigantic binder
Yes.
that was CEQA to go through. Can you give the commissioners kind of a thumbnail of what it means when you look at a mitigated neg deck versus a CEQA document? Because when you're looking at 500 pages.
Right.
And you've got, if you're lucky, you've got a couple of weeks to review it, but you don't always have that.
Right.
Sometimes you might have a couple of months to review it. But it's usually a matter of weeks because it goes out to the public, it comes back, it moves forward.
Right.
I know I was told by another commissioner, the best thing to do with a CEQA document was to look at the section that says how things are being mitigated. And you look through that and you went, oh, I need to research this in the document to see why this is substantial issues, why this doesn't need to be looked at any further. That way they know
Yeah.
or have an idea what really needs their attention.
Yeah.
within
So it's a good
document.
point. So I'm releasing the downtown plan EAR probably in the next 30 or so days. I got quite a few comments from council. So it's probably going to be about 300 or 400 page document. I will be printing that off, giving it to the commission and council. So for commissioners, it can be overwhelming. So we're going to try to give it to you guys early. So for us as CEQA practitioners, is the document consistent? So that's something that you should look for. If the traffic, if the downtown plan in the beginning says, we're going to try to build 3,000 housing units in the downtown, but you flip through the document and the traffic says, well, they're anticipating 6,000 housing units and these are all the traffic impacts. Well, that's an inconsistency. So CEQA documents have to be consistent. So I would look for that. Make sure the traffic section lines up with the project description. Make sure that lines up with the greenhouse gases. And further tips, the unholy trinity of public hearings is parking, noise, and traffic. That comes up at every public hearing. So definitely hit up the noise section, hit up the parking section. Obviously read the whole thing, but those are the ones that most people will be most
Definitely,
concerned
right.
about: noise, parking, and traffic. So
I think the other thing I used to look at from a writing perspective was, and then from a reading perspective was the alternatives and understanding the alternatives and the no action alternative.
right.
Because a lot of times that no action alternative ended up becoming a driver for conversation. Like, well,
Why aren't you
or-
taking action?
or pick or what, like 68 is doing right now. They had a design alternative for roundabouts, they had the no action alternative. And then during review, they realized they could create a transitional, we'll just adjust the traffic pattern. And
Yeah.
and they created a third alternative. And what I did is as I read that, again, it doesn't apply, it kind of applies to us because we get all the bleed over of all the traffic issues on 68. As I've gone through and read that, the alternative, it was interesting to understand the kind of background understanding of why they decided to add that alternative after the fact from the original design and try to pick out the reason why.
Yeah.
So I think
And,
that's-
and we're really fortunate. We have people from all walks of life on the dais here. You know, truthfully, does it pass the smell test? I mean, if somebody's building a 500,000 square foot commercial development and you flip to the traffic section and it says there will be no traffic impacts from this project. Right? Right? You have to use your own, your own professional and, life experience. Right? Does it pass the smell test? Yeah.
A question, because we're talking about traffic in a CEQA document or in a mitigated net.
Yeah.
And I know when the planning commission first examined Cypress Knolls, when I was on the planning commission, one of the items dealing with traffic was, well, we're going to have MST put in multiple bus stops in order
Mhm.
to deal with the traffic. Well, what if MST doesn't have the bus service in order to do that? In
Right.
other words, they don't have the drivers, they don't have enough buses, et cetera. Can you put in a CEQA document what you think you can accomplish, or do you need to actually have that conversation with MST? The traffic study may say, yes, that would be an effective way of dealing with it. But do you have to have the conversation with another agency to make sure that's going to happen?
Yeah, and so for example, for like the downtown plan, when I released the EIR, MST, Department of Transportation, Fish and Game, all these agencies will get the document and they will give us comments. And part of that comment will be, hey, you're building this 500,000 square foot Costco. And the local transit agency will say, hey, we really think we need to put in a transit stop there. And then that becomes a mitigation measure. And then that's part of the discussion is, hey, we're putting this in our document. The council is adopting this. Is this legitimately something that the city can work with you on? Because we're on the hook as a city to implement those mitigation measures. If it's not feasible, if it's not practical, it really shouldn't be put in a sequence. I mean, it has to be, within reason. So,
One of the things that I noticed when we would review secret documents is the other big item that the public was concerned about was air quality,
right.
and especially on the former corridor because of the asbestos, et cetera. So we may find as commissioners, we may find that the public is very concerned about air quality, especially with changes to what will become our downtown.
Yeah.
So
So we shall see. Once I release the AR, then we'll get better comments. So that's just basically the 3 levels of CEQA. When you see those specific sections on your staff report, you can ask us questions at the meeting, you can email staff, or you can Google it on your own, just so you know. And we can give you a little cheat sheet if you guys want. Next up, making motions. So as I explained to the commission a couple months ago, Commissioner Woodson brought to our attention some of the issues around the Starbucks. So Nick and I did a deeper dive into the final resolution. I went back and watched the tape. A lot of your comments, Commissioner Woodson, are on the tape, but it did not make it into the final motion. So I thought this would be a good teachable moment for the commission in terms of we want you to know that as staff, we take what you say seriously, and we want to make sure that direction you give us that we do follow. So just wanted to have that as a caveat. So as city planners, we're bound to follow existing legal precedent. 2 very famous planning cases are the Nolan and Dolan court cases. The Nolan versus the Coastal Commission establish the nexus test, there has to be a relationship between what the city is trying to accomplish and the conditions of approval you guys put on the project. Or what is basically, what is the connection? So you guys did a great job on Harvey's gas station. You deliberated. You said, hey, we have concerns about some of the accidents. You expressed that in public testimony, and you put a very reasonable condition that said the nexus between your project, Harvey, and the gas station was that we're concerned about the accidents. That is a very reasonable nexus. And going to the Dolan court case, you added a condition that said, hey, we want to have you study a year after you open, what are the impacts of the gas station on IMGEN? And that passes the Dolan rough proportionality test. So the motion must be specific. And if the conditions are added, agreed to by the entire legislative body. So one of the things I appreciate about the commission is, I can't remember who made that suggestion, but the rest of the commission said, yes, we agree with the commissioner making that condition. And as I said, the conditions must have a clear nexus and be proportional to the impact. So I just wanted to give a couple examples. So
If I
yeah,
could add
yeah.
to that, because I think it's really important for commissioners to understand that any commissioner can make a friendly amendment if they believe something that the other commissioners seem to be going along with, but it's not in the motion. You can always make a friendly amendment to the motion to add that condition or these particular words to ensure that the things that were discussed, the motioner has the opportunity to accept or reject it. If the motioner rejects it, you can make a substitute motion and include everything that the motioner said, and then adding to it what you think is important. In that way, it gets voted on one way or the other. The commissioners may agree with the original motion or with the alternate motion. So, and always the alternate motion is done first.
So I'll give you an example of a bad motion. We recommend approval of design review permit to build a new house with the condition that a flood analysis be done of the entire flood zone to demonstrate the project does not have an impact on the abutting creek. That's too broad. Flood zones go for hundreds and sometimes, across entire cities. So a better motion is recommend approval of a design review permit to build a new house with the condition that a flood analysis be done of the abutting creek within 500 feet of the house to determine if the project will have a negative impact on the stream. It's specific, and the condition has a clear nexus to the project. They're building a house right near a creek. There probably will be some additional stormwater runoff into the creek. So we're asking the applicant to study the creek near the house, not the entire flood zone. Okay? If the commission is adding a condition as a courtesy, we should ask the applicant if this is feasible and if they do accept this condition. I started doing this a couple years ago. I was in East Palo Alto and a council member added a condition, and then it became this big issue. The applicant actually didn't get a chance to go up there and say, actually, no, I don't agree with this. So we had to go back, we had to work with the city manager there, work with the council, had to come back. So after that, I was like, you know what? If you guys add a condition, and I think Harvey was actually a good applicant. You guys, hey, we want to add this condition. Do you agree to this? And Harvey said, absolutely. So that actually was a good practice that you guys have
I didn't
established.
say absolutely.
Well-
Initially, he didn't. Initially, he
said-
didn't quite agree.
Right,
And
but
you didn't-
we eventually got there.
But
I
we
think the
all.
reason he didn't quite agree with it is he was thinking, he wanted 2 years, but he was thinking 2 years from time of approval. We were
Right.
talking about 1 year
Right.
after the service.
Right.
Right.
opened.
Operational.
So, yeah, so once he understood that, he agreed with that.
Right. So kind of what you guys have already doing. So yeah, so make it into the motion. Ex parte communication, we've already talked quite a bit about this. Basically, my job as a staff member is to make sure applicants get a fair hearing. So, and part of that is if you get information outside of this public hearing setting, you're kind of obligated to share that with the public, the staff, and the applicant. No one wants to go to court and find out that the judge talked to somebody in his judge's chambers and the decision's already been made, right? That's basically, you're commissioners, you're acting as quasi judicial officials for use permits, tentative maps. So if you talk to your neighbor and all your neighbors hate this project, and if you can't come to the hearing and have an open mind and you don't share that you've had all these conversations, you're not being willing to hear the testimony from staff and the applicant. So, so if a commissioner has an ex parte communication related to a quasi judicial application, a use permit, a design review permit, a tentative map, we encourage disclosure of this contact at the beginning of the public hearing. So, any questions about this before I keep going? All right, so housing element. So hopefully we get certified in the next 30 or 45 days. Fingers crossed. We shipped it up to the state December 15th-ish or so. But you will continually hear me talk about the housing element as long as I work here. There are 6 action items we have to adopt in 2024 to keep our certification up. We're doing the pre-approved ADU program. We're getting REAP money to riff off. The planning commission gave us some good input during the housing element. Hey, Guido, what can we do to make building housing more economical? So we're going to be creating an economical housing toolkit, modular homes, small lots, different ways that we can make housing more affordable. We are going to be adopting a faith-based properties overlay that's in program 2.3. We are going to be adopting an ordinance supporting housing on school district properties. That's also state law now. We need to update our inclusionary housing ordinance. That will be before the commission. We need to amend our parking ordinance. And we need to further amend the zoning code to support transitional and supportive housing. And later in the year, after objective standards are adopted, we will be recommending that the DRC be merged permanently with the Planning Commission to further streamline reviewing of housing projects.
I do have a question, and that is in regards to the parking ordinance.
Yeah.
Because it's the thing we get the most complaints about in any new project, whether it's single family homes, because there are more homes per acre than there have been in the past, therefore there's less street parking. And of course, you have always gotten it with family R4 zoning areas where that becomes a legitimate concern when they don't have bus routes that are readily available, especially to people who have limited mobility.
Yeah.
So my question is, when you say amend the parking ordinance to support housing projects, what does that actually mean? in terms of-
Program 3-1 of the housing element is being requested that the city remove the requirement for covered parking, not the number of spaces.
Okay.
So that is, so it would not, you would still have to provide the parking, it just would not have to be covered. But just to let the commission know, we're probably gonna keep amending the parking ordinance, but kind of the theme of tonight is housing. If you're within half mile of a major transit stop, you can't require any parking. If you have a density bonus project, you can only do 0.5 parking per unit, and on and on. These are all the bills that Nick and I have to implement, and it's all basically the state telling the cities, don't let parking drive housing. It should be the other way around. But I do agree with you that we're not in downtown San Francisco where there's a BART station right next door. But these bills get adopted and Nick and I have to implement them, and sometimes it doesn't make a lot of sense for a suburban community, but anyways, so that's,
So
yeah.
is there any possibility that the city would be working with MST in order to provide more stops, more busing service within the city limits so that people would, as again, I've said, limited mobility especially, but in bad weather, you're
Yeah.
gonna walk half a mile in the pouring rain to catch a bus. We need, there used to be, by my house, and I'm single family, by my house, within 2 blocks in any direction, I had access to buses. Now I don't have any.
Yeah,
All 3 of them disappeared since I bought my home. My husband has limited mobility. There's no way he can walk to the nearest bus stop. He can't do it. It's physically impossible for him.
yeah,
So, when I look at those things, it impacts our family specifically. And our family isn't as impacted as families that live in multifamily residential. Obviously, if we own our own home, we are more financially able to look at our alternatives. But people who live in multifamily residential, they don't have as many options. And if they live in mobile home parks, they often don't have as many options.
yeah.
And so I would want to know if the city is going to work with MST to improve public transportation within the city of Marina.
I would say, so the circulation element is a chapter of the general plan. If that's something that the commission wants to focus on when we bring the general plan back to the commission, that's something we can certainly take a look at.
Great.
So,
Thank you.
yeah,
All right, now that we've opened that Pandora's box. All right, we've got that, but at the same time, we also have the whole EIR, the developmental process, everything that's going on with SURF and MST. And that has been very prescriptive that there is no additional set of routing that they're considering. They're considering adding frequency and capacity to to the current lines by doubling up the number of buses per hour, for
Right.
example. There is nothing that MST has presented anything within the SURF proposal that has talked about expanding capacity across the entire city into other areas. And so and again, this isn't the right form necessary for this.
yeah,
You raised the question, but from a staffing perspective, if we're going to look at kind of that down the road and where that fits, then wouldn't that also be a good time for this discussion to go on when we're trying to make a final determination and they're trying to sell surf to this community? And so how does that, when MST has come in and talked to us and to the city council and any of their public briefings, it has been very prescribed. Here's what we're going to present. Here are the 2 bus lines that exist within your city. Here are where the new bus stops are going to go in. This is where surf is going to go in. And we are not looking at anything else. And so there has never been an opportunity to discuss that component of it, okay, what are other alternatives that would increase the coverage map for the city of Marina?
yeah.
So how do we, and maybe this isn't necessarily a planning commission, but how do we as residents of the city
Right.
bring that busing public transit into this conversation? Because MST is absolutely not considering that at all.
Yeah. So, I mean, outside of the search project, I would say as residents, you have multiple avenues to speak with your council member, to attend MST board meetings, to get involved with the general plan in terms of making sure that there's strong multimodal policies in the circulation element. So there's a lot of different ways to get to your goal, but it just does involve.
I was hoping it would fit into the housing element. because Part of housing is how do these people that
Yeah,
try into
well,
all of these places?
And I think maybe
More,
it is.
yeah, less for housing element, but so.
And I guess that's kind of my point is, okay, we as a planning commission, where we have direct input into this is within the general plan, within the infrastructure component of it, and we can bring this up.
Yeah,
It is, however, that is divorced from what MST is trying to do right now. And then from an execution perspective, even in the general plan, if we raise this as a valid issue that we want addressed in the city, that we want a higher density of routes within our city, we still are beholden to MST to even listen to us. They can pretty much ignore our general plan and say, we're going to keep our 2 routes and that's the end of it.
Yeah, I mean, there is a certain amount of input from the public and they are a separate agency, you know, that's part of our role to collaborate and we can certainly bring them here to a planning commission meeting. I mean, there's a lot of different ways to have your voice be heard in the process, so.
So can we, I guess, last point, as I beat a dead horse on this. Then from a staffing perspective, can we, even though this is training, can we kind of leave that as a conversation piece to you all? That as we move forward with the general plan, that we would like that discussion point added to MST and have a conversation with MST about that.
Absolutely. And you can come to the GPAC meetings and share that input and put that in writing and Alice and I will follow up with the GPAC. So.
Great.
Thanks.
I emailed the chair, hey, what do you want to talk about today in terms of all the stuff I've already? She said, hey, Guido, we should give some tips about how to review big projects. So my life as a planner is the project consistent with the general plan? Is there a specific plan or an airport plan? You know, Joby's going to come in a couple of weeks for a project. Is that consistent with all the airport regulations? And consistency is a big deal for planners. You know, if it's in the airport area, does it interfere with the operation of airplanes? I mean, is it a use that's, yeah. Is it a navigational use that's consistent? Is it consistent with the zoning code? You know, and you as residents can look up the same zoning code that Nick and I interpret. Neighborhood consistency is not as much of a thing as when I first started because of all the housing bills we've talked about. But in your opinion, as a resident, as a commissioner, do you think this particular project fits within the neighborhood context? Part of objective standards is to have something written down of how we can make these multifamily projects consistent with the look and feel of Marina, right? That's another way. So those would be our biggest tips is consistency. General plan, zoning, you know, and whatever specific plan or so. I don't know if you have other tips. I know you've been on the commission for a while, Chair, if you had any other input.
I don't think so.
Okay, sounds good. Sounds good.
I'm looking. I may come back to it.
All right, sounds good. Sounds good. So just to further give a little movie teaser to the commission, so big ticket items. So we are going to be bringing the objective zoning standards to the commission in February. We've talked about the housing element compliant action items. Allison got a $500,000 grant from the Coastal Commission to do the city's first comprehensive coastal program update in over 40 years. I will be bringing the downtown specific plan for hopefully adoption. Nick's been working on some big aviation projects for Joby, and Allison will continue to be the project manager for the general plan. So all of you as volunteers to the city are playing an extremely vital role for the long range planning of the city, and all of these projects will have many, many year impact upon your community. So we thank you for your service to the city.
I have a question regarding Joby Aviation. It's very exciting that they're going to be staying here with us. Several years ago now, it feels like, we approved a much larger facility. The original facility is what we see and with the idea that they were going to build the second facility. So that got approved. Is that being modified or is that still planned to be constructed now that they've gotten their grants from the state and things seem to be moving forward?
Yeah, so back in 2019, the original entitlement was for 2 phases of constructing large 500,000 square feet roughly of Joby Aviation facilities buildings. They come to us with a 226,000 square foot shell building instead of the 500,000 square foot facility. And that's what they got the money from the state that the city of Marina helped them get to help fund that. So that's gonna be their project that we'll be bringing later this month to you guys to look at for design review. So,
So they're manufacturing going elsewhere, but their R&D is gonna stay here. Is that kind of what's going on?
yeah, yeah, and we'll get into the nitty gritty of that. They're proposing to do a shell building at first, so I will speak to what they'll use that building for in that meeting, so you'll get a little rundown of it and a little preview. Because we needed that information to understand parking and overall site impacts. So I'll go over that for you guys in a few weeks.
I have another question related to the airport because it's not just Joby Aviation. We do have a runway and
Right.
years ago, it was planned to lengthen the runway, and as a result of lengthening the runway, that was going to change in some measure the Marina station where you could only have parks or light industrial area. Is there still a plan to lengthen that runway? And if not, how does that impact the Marina station development?
So Marina Station has an navigation easement through the whole middle of it that says, I mean, I can show you guys the map, but basically throughout the whole middle part of Marina Station, you can't have residential, you can only have light industrial, and if a plane crashes, they don't want it to go into a daycare kind of scenario, right? So that goes all through. In terms of the expansion of the runway, that was a big ticket item when I started 2 years ago, and that kind of has dropped off. I think that requires a little bit more further study. That's my understanding. I don't know if you have any.
Yeah, in my discussions with the current airport manager, that was really the vision of the previous airport manager. And so that we have our airport master plan, which goes into a lot of detail of that. And actually the aviation easement would actually extend beyond Marina Station, which is an issue because we have homes there. So there's a little bit of constraints in Marina to do that. So I don't think that's the current focus. I think the focus right now is supporting Joby and
It'll
working
just be small aircraft.
for now. Yeah, and there's aircraft that can take off by going straight up and then out. And so his most recent idea is to look at something like that. So there's other options for our airport where we can really utilize it still. So I think he's very smart. If you ever have a chance to go to the airport, Matt Nelson is over there and he can answer all your questions much better than we can. So
Yeah.
I recommend giving him a call or going by and visiting him because
And,
he's
and the only reason why I asked is because I know that the Marina Station project is going through the process, as is Joby Aviation, and I knew what the airport plan had been for an extension of that runway, so
Yeah.
I wanted to know where that was at.
So that concludes our training. Once again, we appreciate your service to the city and you guys taking time off to be with us. What you're working on is not insignificant. A general plan will completely outlast me and my employment here. That thing will be approved and live on for another 20, 30 years. A lot of the zoning code amendments might seem insignificant, but those really provide people in supportive and transitional housing, ADUs that gives more access to different housing groups. The downtown plan, if we can hopefully get that thing adopted, that's another 3,000 housing units and another 1.3 or 1.4 million square feet of new office and retail that will have a transformative impact upon you as residents. In addition to the road diet that Brian in Public Works is working on, you guys are playing a significant role. Even on the housing element stuff, a lot of that stuff might seem inconsequential, but all of those action items that you guys are going to work on this year, if we can keep our housing element certified, that makes Brian in Public Works eligible for millions and millions of dollars of public road, sidewalk improvements that help your quality of life and your kids and your grandkids and your families. So we appreciate your service to the city. And I know that some of this stuff gets super technical, zoning, nerdy stuff, but you really are helping us make a difference. So thank you. So
And I will add to that, not only does it help staff make a difference, but planning commission isn't often recognized by the public for the things that they do. But you are on the ground floor for the next 40 years of how this city matures and grows. And so you may not get patted on the back, but someday someone's going to be walking the streets of Marina going, "Boy, I wonder how they came up with this idea. This was such a great idea." You are leaving your footprint on the city in a huge way.
So we thank you. That concludes, staff.
Oh,
Staff, if there's other
more.
questions or comments or how,
One more one.
so,
Can't let you go.
yeah.
The major items page, big ticket items. Is Cypress Knolls deferred to say 2025?
No, I could have added that too. Cypress Knolls. So we had a meeting with Congressman Panetta 2 weeks ago. There are some pretty large, very competitive grants to maybe clean up Cypress Knolls. But we are one of 478 cities in the state, and there's probably thousands of cities in the whole country vying for limited dollars. So the congressman's office has pledged to work with us to maybe get some letters of support and connect us with some people at the US EPA to make our grant application maybe a little bit more competitive. Because one of the stumbling blocks for Cypress Knolls is there's about $25 million of cleanup that we have to do because of all the old Army barracks. So yeah, that's still on one of my top 5 items that I'm personally working on. So.
I can answer that. The developers who came in to develop those projects came in with getting if the land had been cleared already, the land would have been way more valuable. And they would have had to pay way more for the opportunity to develop it. So the city didn't have the money to tear it down. The Army said, "No, your problem." Forrest said, "No, your problem." And so the developers that came in, they agreed to do the tear down, but they would pay far less for the property in the first place. We had similar agreement early on with a developer. Unfortunately, the 2008 economic downturn came along and they went bankrupt. So that one didn't happen. And then we tried to do it again, I want to say in 2000. So I want to say 2011, I think is when it was. And 2 developers. And the developer that was chosen by the city council could not meet the requirements of the project. And the project was then split in half and it still couldn't be met. The cost to remove all of that was way too high and we were still, what do I want to say? The development community was still recovering from the downturn in the economy. So the cost was just prohibitive for them to be able to build. So that's what happened.
Okay. Yeah, I mean, there's a lot of different ways that we can tackle this. We can maybe get some initial seed money to clean up part of the property and then sell part of it to fund the rest of the project. A developer can come in and create a kind of a infrastructure district to help fund the ongoing cleanup. We can sell the property. So there's a lot of different ways, but the cleaner route is if we are able to get the grant money and clean it up, it makes it a lot more viable, a lot more valuable. And since we own it, you as residents will have more of a say of what we want there, so.
And that was something that I didn't mention with both Blue Haven and with the Dunes. There was something called tax increment financing through the redevelopment agencies, and the redevelopment agencies were abolished. And when they were abolished, that form of financing was no longer available to do the deconstruction that needed to be done.
Yeah. Yeah, yeah, yeah.
So it really hurt us in terms of, and Seaside, but in terms of developing new housing projects. So now the state is trying to find other ways to
Yep.
encourage housing when they took away a big funding resource through redevelopment agencies.
So was there a reason that was the people?
It's a long, sort of convoluted story, but making it very simple. And Guido, you feel free to jump in anytime.
The city of LA and some other cities were redeveloping properties that had already been redeveloped. So all the tax money that would have gone to the state was going back to cities. And the Governor Brown stepped in and said, stop the shenanigans. We need the money because we have a major deficit in our state budget. So that's part of the reason why they got rid of redevelopment. And then school districts were losing money because the money were going to the redevelopment agencies. So that's part of the reason why Governor Brown also stepped in, is there was some bad actor cities not doing right by the redevelopment law. And so, yeah.
There were several bad
Yeah,
actors.
so-
Unfortunately, the entire state of California was punished for the bad actors.
Yeah.
And that happens. It's unfortunate, but you can't make a law for one group and not do it for the whole. It has to apply to the entire state. So. Okay. And if you can pull this up and I'll see if there's anything else on the
sure,
agenda
sure,
that
sure, sure.
needs to be covered tonight.
Sure, one
Thank
second, one second,
you.
no problem.
Well, thanks for the background info.
No problem, that's why we're here.
There it is. Okay, informational. Any staff updates?
Not at this time.
Okay, I didn't think so, 'cause after what we've just been through, and I certainly didn't think there was any correspondence that, and we've had major project updates as a result of this. So guess what, folks? We're adjourned.
Yay. Thank you, guys.